You're on the train going home, and it's a very sexy scene. Well, that's not funny because there is no sex on the train at 14. Diane Lane was on the cover of Time magazine at 14. By 18, she was a millionaire with an angelic face. She was a teenage star that Hollywood was chasing, but the further she went, the quieter she became. It wasn't until she was 59 that she finally admitted she had affairs with both Timothy Hutton and Christopher Atkins, two co-stars that had been long thought to be involved. From being a young star in A Little Romance to the hauntingly intense scene in Unfaithful, people always thought she was dating someone real. There have been two failed marriages, a controversial arrest, and a lot of rumors that were never addressed about Diane Lane. But who is she behind those sad eyes? This is the story that has never been told fully, and you won't want to miss it. Diane Lane was born on January 22, 1965 in New York City. Her mother, Colleen Lee Farrington, also known as Colleen Price, was a nightclub singer and model who once appeared as Playboy Miss October 1957 centerfold. Her father, Burton Eugene Lane, was an acting coach in Manhattan who ran a theater workshop with John Cassavetes, worked as a taxi driver, and later taught. When Diane was only 13 days old, her parents split up. Her mother moved to Mexico and filed for divorce, but she kept custody of Diane until she was 6 years old. When she moved to Georgia, she gave Diane to her father. From then on, Diane lived with her father in New York for many years, going from one residential hotel to another and often riding with him in his taxi every day. Diane's childhood was marked by rides across Manhattan in an old cab, irregular schooling, and an unconventional upbringing. She didn't grow up in stability but was immersed in small stages and the bohemian life of artists. It was a time that forced her to grow up. Diane declared CED herself when she was 15 years old and no longer had to live with her father. She flew to Los Angeles for a week with Christopher Atkins, her co-star and friend from Child Bride of Short Creek. Diane would later say that she did this because she was too free and too young. When she got back to New York, she moved in with a friend's family, paid her rent, and finished high school through a correspondence program. But in 1981, her mother suddenly reappeared and took her back to Georgia. Diane and her father sued, and 6 weeks later, Diane was allowed to return to New York. During her time in Georgia with her Pentecostal grandmother, Diane Lane sometimes visited the town of Bau, where she learned to live simply away from the chaos. She talked about eating salted meat butter, fixing lawnmowers, and living without any responsibilities. For her, it was a way to stay calm and grounded in the high-pressure world of Hollywood. These events, her parents' divorce, living in unstable situations, and having to grow up quickly, helped shape Diane Lane into an independent woman who is wary of the media and who always makes a clear distinction between her real life and the role she plays. In 1979, Diane Lane started her film career as a child, starring in a romantic comedy with the legendary Laurence Olivier. The movie wasn't just a stepping stone, it was an explosion that made Diane Lane famous across the country overnight on screen. She wasn't just a cute kid, she was a real actress with expressive eyes, nuanced emotions, and a depth of feeling far beyond her years. Less than a year later, she became the center of attention when she was on the cover of Time magazine's August 13, 1979 issue with the headline "Hollywood's Whiz Kids." The magazine called her a fresh breeze in an era of cinema lacking in audiences didn't fall in love with Diane Lane because she was perfect. They fell in love with her because she was honest and pure on screen. Diane Lane didn't act like she was reciting lines. She lived in each scene and made adults and kids believe every emotion was real. At age 14, Diane had already earned the audience's trust, which is something that many actors spend their whole career trying to get. That brilliant start would become the reason why, despite all the ups and downs that would come, she would always receive Hollywood's rarest currency, patience and respect. Soon after, Diane continued to appear in a string of major films like Touched by Love and Six Pack, then reached her peak with movies like Rumble Fish, The Outsiders, Streets of Fire, and The Cotton Club. Many of these movies were directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who gave her 3 roles in a row, which was a huge compliment for a teenage actress. By the time she was 18, Diane Lane was a millionaire thanks to her high salaries, busy film schedule, and constant appearances on the big screen. But as her fame grew, Diane also had to deal with the bad things that came with it. While she was still a teenager, she was rumored to be dating co-stars Matt Dillon, Michael Paré, and Richard Gere just because they got along so well on screen. Diane often had to deny these rumors in public or keep quiet to protect her private life, which she didn't want shared. For example, just because I play someone's lover in a movie doesn't mean I love them in real life, but a lot of people don't get that. Also, most of the roles she got at this time were variations on the ideal girlfriend, which meant she was typecast and rarely had chances to show a wider range of emotions. Audiences started to blur the line between Diane the actress and the character she played, which made her have to stay away from the media and be more selective with her scripts. Diane Lane jumped right into Hollywood and became a star, which was impressive, but she had to quickly learn that being famous isn't the same as being understood, and that being a great actress isn't enough. You also have to know how to survive in a world that wants to write your story for you. After years of being cast as the on-screen girlfriend and living in the blurred space between character and reality, Diane Lane entered a new phase in her career where she didn't just act but demanded to be heard as a fully formed artist. In 2002, she starred in Adrian Lyne's Unfaithful as Connie Sooner, a wife who cheats not out of lust but because she feels deeply lonely and disconnected in a marriage that seems perfect on the outside. Diane's first time playing a character with so many layers and emotional conflicts was in Connie's scene on the train after her first affair. There is no dialogue or sex, just trembling hands, dazed eyes, and shallow breaths. The scene is still praised as a great example of acting through silence, but few people know that it wasn't in the original script. In an interview with the Jess Cagle Show, Diane said, "We had finished the shot and were bringing the train back to the station when Adrian Lyne said, 'Just shoot something.' I didn't ask anything. I just closed my eyes and started. We filmed it in one take and never did it again on Late Night with Conan O'Brien." She laughed and said, "There's no sex scene on the train, but everyone thinks there is. That's the power of emotion and the lens." Diane Lane's performance as Connie earned her a nomination for an Academy Award for Best Actress and the Actress of the Year award at the Hollywood Film Awards. But more importantly, it changed the public's view of her as not just a teenage girlfriend defined by her male co-star, but a real actress whose eyes and silence could carry a whole movie. After Unfaithful, Diane Lane didn't slow down. Less than a year later, she was back in Under the Tusking Sun 2003. The tone of the movie she played, Frances, was very different from her other roles. She played a recently divorced middle-aged woman who leaves her old life in the U.S. to buy a rundown villa in Tuscany and start over. Frances wasn't looking for love, she was looking for herself. Diane Lane based her character on a real person. In an interview on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, she admitted that filming in Tuscany at first seemed like a dream vacation, but after 5 weeks it got too much. She said, "I had eaten all the wine, all the olive oil, tried all the pasta, and I missed my normal life." Diane Lane was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy for her role as Frances, a woman coming out of heartbreak strong without acting. It became a new symbol for middle-aged women in Hollywood. Diane Lane portrayed rebirth in a deeply human way that was slow, clumsy, and true. With Under the Tuscan Sun, Diane was no longer just an actress who had outgrown her teenage fame, but a grown woman connecting with a whole generation of women searching for themselves after loss. As Frances, Diane Lane became a role model for middle-aged women in Hollywood. Diane Lane didn't just play the same character in Tuscan Sun, she went into the world of quiet, flawed women whose inner lives were full of silent rebellion. In A Walk on the Moon 1999, she played a wife who is slowly drifting away from the marriage she once chose while her husband is away at work and the summer vacation becomes empty. Diane's character quietly betrays him, not because the lover is irresistible, but because she no longer sees herself in the quiet life of a devoted wife. The movie has no dramatic confrontations, just the eyes of a woman who knows she's doing wrong but can't stop. The role earned Diane a nomination for the Independent Spirit Awards, but more importantly, it was the start of a new era in which Diane acted with emotion instead of dialogue. In Secretariat 2010, she played Penny Chenery, a middle-aged housewife who reluctantly inherits her father's horse farm. In the male-dominated world of professional horse racing where men make all the decisions and women are expected to keep quiet, Penny not only survives but also leads Secretariat to become one of the greatest racehorses in American history. This role broke age-based stereotypes and was Diane's quiet statement, "I don't play the lover anymore, I play the leader." In Trumbo 2015, Diane took a break from acting. During the Hollywood blacklist era, Diane played Cleo Fincher, the wife of screenwriter Dalton Trumbo. The role wasn't meant to make people feel sorry for her because Cleo was the kind of woman who was rarely seen on film. She silently carried the weight of her husband's decisions without complaining or running away, and Diane did it with suffocating resolve. No big speeches were needed. Just by standing there she showed how heavy her character's decisions were. Beyond playing strong women in silence, Diane also went back to romance and Nights in Rodin, the 2008, reuniting with Richard Gere after more than 20 years. This time they weren't passionate young lovers, they were two adults who had Diane and Jar acted as if they had once loved each other in real life. And the audience believed it because that kind of chemistry doesn't need to be proven. It speaks for itself in every glance and in the long silences shared between two souls. For many years, Diane Lane kept up a calm and reserved public image. She wasn't one for red carpet drama or controversial statements. She was seen as the kind of artist who lived for her craft and avoided scandal. But in 2005, during an interview with Esquire magazine, Diane broke her long-held silence with a confession that left many people shocked. She said it straight out, as if shedding a heavy burden. That admission didn't just shock the media, it made people think again about the years of romantic rumors that had been going around about her since the 1980s. Rumors that had been brushed off about Matt Dillon, Michael Parra, and Richard Gere suddenly took on new weight. But what really made this confession stand out wasn't the names Timothy Hutton and Christopher Atkins, it was the contradiction that it showed a woman who so often played characters who were hurt by. In real life, betrayal crossed that line, which paradoxically turned Diane Lane, who had been seen as a symbol of raw, honest emotion, into a figure with more layers of right and wrong, victim and transgressor role. In reality, some fans were let down, but others thought her honesty showed that she wasn't acting, she was living, even when the truth wasn't flattering. From a young age, Diane Lane's personal life was followed by the public, but Christopher Lambert was the one she stayed with the longest and who still made her smile whenever she talked about him. They met in Paris in 1984. While Diane was promoting a movie, he was a rising star in Europe and she was a rising star in Hollywood. It didn't take long for them to fall in love across continents, and 4 years later in 1988 they got married. Their marriage wasn't loud or driven by the tabloids, which may be why it's remembered as one of the few peaceful times in Diane Lane's often troubled life. They had a daughter named Eleanor Jasmine Lambert in 1993, who Diane would later call the guiding light in every decision she made in life. But like many couples in the entertainment industry, Diane and Luke escaped the stresses of long distance, busy schedules, and the clash of they were from different cultures and got divorced in 1994 after 6 years of marriage. There was no scandal and no anger after the divorce. Both went their separate ways and found new partners. Diane Lane married actor Josh Brolin in 2004 and Christopher Lambert married actress J.M. Sherwood in 1999, but the marriage only lasted a year. From 2007 to 2014 he dated actress Sophie Marceau. It's important to note that Diane never said bad things about Lambert. She often said, "We truly loved each other, but sometimes love." It's admirable that even though they broke up, they stayed friends and co-parented their daughter like true teammates. Not every relationship ends in loss. Diane and Christopher Lambert's ended with acceptance and growth, not anger. That's how Diane Lane chooses to live quietly, taking responsibility and never blaming others. It took her almost 10 years to open her heart again, and when she did, she chose someone just as complicated, actor Josh Brolin, known for his rugged good looks and turbulent personal life. They got engaged in July 2003 and married on August 15, 2004. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple.
Both had been through heartbreak, were mature, and breathed like it was oxygen, but just over 4 months after the wedding, the relationship hit its first rough patch. On December 20th, 2004, Diane Lane called the police after a heated argument with Josh Brolin was arrested on a misdemeanor charge of domestic battery, which quickly caused a media frenzy. However, Diane Lane did not press charges, and their spokesperson later said that the incident was a misunderstanding. There were no court proceedings and no one was held accountable, but the couple's image was no longer the same. Lane made no statements to the media. Press Diane Lane didn't accuse or defend herself in the media. She kept quiet. After that, she seemed to withdraw even more, avoiding public events and spending more time being a mother and the calm center of her home. The marriage lasted almost 10 years, but in the end, Diane was the one who chose to end it. She and Brolin filed for divorce in February 2013, and it was finalized on November 27, 2013. Neither spoke badly of the other in public, and there were no legal battles or post-divorce media campaigns. Everything happened quietly, just as Diane had always dealt with pain without making a fuss. Diane Lane and Josh Brolin both went on to have more success in their acting careers after the divorce. Brolin also said that he had been sober since 2013 after several incidents involving alcohol. If Diane Lane's first marriage ended in mutual respect and grace, then her second marriage showed signs of stress and emotional limits. Diane Lane never said she was a victim, but her decision to step back, stay silent, and walk away was the clearest statement she could make about self-respect and quiet strength. On screen, Diane Lane often plays women who endure, wrestle with emotion, and carry deep wounds. Diane Lane brings those feelings to life when she's not on camera, like when she plays the tormented Connie who cheats on the reborn Francis in Under the Tuscan Sun, or Martha Kent, the personification of silent sacrifice. But when asked about her cooking skills on a talk show, she laughed and said, "I'm only good at playing someone who can cook in movies. In real life, I've bought takeout and pretended I made it myself." Diane doesn't try to be perfect, which is exactly what makes her seem so relatable. She was nominated for an Oscar and was on the cover of Time magazine as Allure, but in a 1995 interview with Playboy, Diane Lane also talked about an odd and surprising personal interest. "I'm obsessed with thigh-high boots. I have a whole collection of high heels. I love the feeling of being lifted a few inches. Seductive, funny, and instinctive." That's Diane Lane when she's not in character. She loves collecting antique furniture, enjoys walking, practices yoga, rides horses, and spends as much time as possible with her daughter Eleanor. Lane doesn't follow trends or make a fuss about her life. She lives simply but never ordinary. Maybe that's why people always feel like she's being honest. Diane Lane doesn't try to create a persona, whether she's on or off screen. She just lives her life as herself, which can be a little strange or quirky at times, but never fake. Unlike many Hollywood stars who take to the media to share their feelings, Diane Lane chooses a different path. She doesn't fight back when she's misunderstood. She doesn't sob publicly after a breakup. She stays quiet, as if what happens in her life only needs to be understood by her alone. Some people think that's a sign of weakness, but to Diane, it's a sign of strength. She doesn't have anything to say after 2 failed marriages, a controversial arrest, and a career-long swirl of romantic relationships. There are rumors that she still lives in a private space that the press can't get to, and that fame doesn't affect her feelings. Some stars make the world remember them through noise, but Diane Lane chose to leave her mark through silence. There were no scandals, no explosive box office campaigns, and no over-the-top media presence. Just a woman who steps in front of the camera and turns pain into art. In 2005, VH1 ranked her 79th on their list of the 100 greatest child stars, recognizing an undeniable truth. That same year, she was also named 7th on the list of the most attractive stars over 40. Audiences love Diane Lane for one reason: she never plays the same role twice. Whether she's Connie and Francis's cheating wife in Under the Tuscan Sun or Martha Kent in DC Universe, each woman has her own story full of scars, contradictions, and light. Diane doesn't paint her characters, she peels them back layer by layer, fear by fear, and gives the audience raw, relatable reflections of themselves. Few actresses have careers that continue to thrive after 40. Diane Lane is different. She hasn't just lasted, she's evolved. She doesn't fight for attention. She doesn't rebrand herself as a feminist icon. Diane Lane's most powerful voice is her quietness, which isn't claimed in the name of anything or tied to any trend. Not many people know that Diane Lane also volunteers in the community. She works quietly with Higher International to support global poverty relief programs. There are no loud announcements or public donation drives, just calm, committed action that isn't seen but never inactive. Diane Lane's legacy isn't measured in golden statues but in the trust that audiences have in her every time she shows up. When she cries, we hurt. When she's quiet, we understand. When she walks away, we miss her, and that's something that not many people in the entertainment business can say. Diane Lane has been completely honest in her work and in her personal life for over 40 years. She doesn't want to be the center of tabloid romances or big-name movie roles anymore. Instead, she chooses a slower, quieter, and more self-directed way of life. She still acts, but not to keep her fame. It's what she does for a living. On the small screen, Diane made a big impression as a sassy politician in House of Cards 2018 and more recently as a New York high society icon in Feud Capo vs. the Swans 2024. This earned her an Emmy nomination, proving that at almost 60 she is still a star. Diane Lane isn't just surviving in Hollywood, she's redefining what it means to be a mature, fearless actress. Diane doesn't live a fancy life. She does yoga every morning, rides horses on the weekends, and walks whenever she can. She also collects old furniture, likes flower arranging, gardening, and reading. In an interview, Diane said that keeping her mind and body healthy every day is more important to her than being in the spotlight. Above all, she spends as much time as she can with her daughter Jasmine Lambert, who was born in 1993 from her first marriage to Christopher Lambert. Eleanor is now a model and freelance writer. Diane Lane has been in Vanity Fair and fronted several fashion campaigns in New York. She once said, "Eleanor is a soulmate, the reason I don't lose myself in a world full of noise." At 60, Diane Lane doesn't want to hold on to her youth. She once said, "Aging is a privilege, every wrinkle is a memory." In a business that values youth and smoothness, that statement sounds like a manifesto. No cosmetic surgery, no chasing ideals. Diane Lane accepts aging as part of the journey. She sees it as beautiful, multi-layered, and rich with experience. Diane Lane doesn't need to call herself a legend, she is already one. Diane Lane has gone from being a 13-year-old girl on the cover of Time magazine to a 60-year-old woman sitting calmly on an Emmy-nominated set. She is still beautiful, not because of plastic surgery or perfect lighting, but because she wears every wrinkle and scar of life like a badge of honor in a Hollywood that is glitzy and cruelly selective. Diane Lane is living proof that natural beauty and a strong spirit will always be in style. What do you think? Is Diane Lane an underrated powerhouse of an actress, or just a teenage star who once burned bright and faded? Which of her roles left a lasting impression on you? What about her as a person moves you the most? Would you be brave enough to age like she has? Tell us what's on your mind in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring portrait. We have more stories to tell about stars who don't just shine but show others the way. Looking into these amazing journeys